In the vast deserts of the Ogaden, the main rains have failed for 3 years now, and the animals are dying in their thousands. It's an unforgiving landscape, its nomadic tribes almost completely cut off from the outside world. The UN and Ethiopia's government say they're trying to avert a famine here. But deep in the bush, this man told us he'd received nothing to eat in months. Because, he said, the Ethiopian army was deliberately starving his people to death.
I am ill and hungry. Because of the drought, there is nothing to eat. The only people who receive food are the military forces. The military takes the food, not the poor people.
It took a 20-mile walk to reach these nomads, who are now so hungry that they're harvesting these dead buds and leaves to eat. We can't reveal where this is. These are ethnic Somalis, so frightened of the army, they told us they could be killed. For this is a war zone, where Ethiopia stands accused of massive human rights abuses, where journalists are arrested or expelled if caught. Just after filming this convoy delivering food from the UN, food feed people here?
No.
The UN's mandate only allows it to feed genuine refugees here, so thousands of Ethiopians displaced by drought are going hungry. In her makeshift shack, Amina Ahmad told me her 4 children had eaten nothing in over 24 hours, and the only way for her family to survive is for their mother to beg. The government's blocking the food from getting here, this woman complained. It's in the dusty state capital, Jijjiga, that the UN and all foreign aid organisations must apply for permission to operate. It's in the middle of a bureaucratic minefield, and so sensitive that aid workers have been repeatedly arrested or ordered to leave for allegedly siding with the rebels. Though the region's president told me his government would never stand in the way of those helping to feed the people.
They take as that we are hindering them. That is not the case, because we need them, I tell you. We need them. There is no any problem of reaching or getting this ration into targeted people. The allegation is false.
Now, the president of the Somali region has told us that we're free to travel with one of the food convoys entering one of the worst affected areas. But for the last 2 days, the president's officials have been arguing amongst themselves over whether we need an official letter of permission. And it's this kind of delay which is so infuriating for the UN and the NGOs who have to work here every day, in their case trying to save lives. Along the roadside we found families who'd walked for hours in search of newly delivered American sacks of wheat and maize. It's not just the drought that's hurting them. The global shortage of food has sent local prices over 350% higher than a year ago. This is all I have, she says. But we travelled for 8 hours on foot into the desert, where villagers told us their children had died from eating the wrong leaves off trees. Their animals are visibly sick, but they claim most of them have already been slaughtered by the Ethiopian army in what they say is a campaign of terror against anyone who might harbour rebels. And because they have nothing else to eat, they eat cactus instead.
We walk for 8 hours with our donkeys to collect water. Then the Ethiopian military take the water away from us. The military do that because they say the rebels pass through our villages and that we give them supplies. But what can we give? We're dying of hunger. I'm worried that the soldiers might come and attack us as I am standing here. I'm not expecting any help from someone who might come and kill me.
We've obtained a copy of an investigation for the US government into the situation in the Ogaden earlier this year, and its findings are damning. It says hundreds of areas have neither been assessed nor have received any food assistance. We heard clearly and regularly that food was being used as a weapon, it continues. The people terrorized by the inability to access food. Its conclusion, the US government cannot, in good conscience, allow the food operation to continue the current manifestation.
There are no NGOs currently working over here. We're trying to get approval and move.
That report reached the desk of Glenn Anders, who directs US humanitarian aid to Ethiopia. He says he's not convinced by its findings, though he will admit that he's worried. How much humanitarian assistance are you putting into Ethiopia this year?
Overall, including the Productive Safety Net Program, about $450 million worth of food aid.
And you're telling me you're worried that it's not all reaching its target?
Yes, I'd say we're concerned, and we've certainly been sharing that concern with the government and pressing them on improvements to the system.
The US report says Ethiopia's food delivery has been, quotes, absolutely abysmal. A potential disaster in the making, it says. We were allowed to film this warehouse, but we were banned from filming where the food went from here. This lack of transparency, despite the fact that the country is appealing through the UN for $325 million more help. But it's not just food which is worrying Ethiopia's donors. Far out in the bush, we filmed in secret, in medieval villages where children still learn the Quran from wood carvings rather than books. And again, we were told of how the army had raped women and hanged men from the trees.
They killed my husband last year. They also beat me up. No one's given us any food. It's part of the government's policy towards us.
The military beat me and raped my two sisters. Torture is common. So when we see the army, we run away.
The food just creates problems for us. If we give our men to the government forces, we will get some food in return. If not, we won't. If the aid agencies were giving food to us, there wouldn't be these problems. But the army takes control to create problems.
It is another story of our enemy, you know, always they are leveling such a trash, smearing campaign against us.
The danger for you is that if your aid operation is criticised, if it is seen as being biased, then countries may decide to cut their assistance.
No, we will assure those donors this assistance would be used properly.
To prove his point, the President gave us a government minder who led us to the town of Degabur, near the heart of the conflict zone. At night we saw scores of soldiers walking the streets, a local woman warning us that anyone caught carrying food into the countryside would be shot. The next day we met these camel herders who said they'd walked 25 miles in search of water. I asked them if they could come into town to collect aid. We can't, they said. It's too dangerous. And at that, our minder urged us to leave immediately. A year ago, the UN called on Ethiopia to hold an independent investigation into human rights abuses. A year on, and the UN is still waiting. In a nutshell, isn't your position that you can't be too critical of the Ethiopian government because you don't want to get thrown out and you want to help the people in this country, and if you're too vocal, that could be the end of it.
We are trying to help people who are in desperate need of help and would not thank us if we disappeared for one reason or another. So that's the reason we do what we do. We try to strike the balance between what we say privately, what we say publicly, the kind of deals, if you like, we can strike. It's not a perfect world, but there are people in desperate need here, and those are the people we're thinking of most.
And the greatest need is concealed here, in the furnace of the Ogaden Desert, where the rains have not come for 3 long years, and the people say that only God can help them now. Jonathan Ruckman, Channel 4 News, in the Ogaden region of Ethiopia.